everybody. We are so excited to be back for another episode of Rooted Conversations. Today, we're going to be exploring the ways in which music inspires all sorts of layers of new civilizational patterns, the things that we can learn from music, the ways in which music is a language of our spirits. And so Fran's going to introduce our special guest today, but we're so excited to have all of you here with us.
Hi, everybody. I'm here with Greg C. Brown, performer, composer, recording artist of over 20 albums, ranging from classical to blues to heavy metal to rock. What have I left out?
Jazz.
And Greg has been a prolific composer whose music you may recognize at the beginning of our Rooted Conversations. Greg is a great model for the ways in which we want to weave music into these new civilizational patterns that we're thinking about. And there are also some surprises to Greg that will come up in a moment. But I'd like to begin by asking him about music. So Greg, many of your compositions are inspired by your time in Hawaii and by your time in nature. Not too long ago, we wrapped up an episode with Brian Collier, a Samoan theologian and biblical scholar who spoke about islander perspectives. Now, you're not Hawaiian, but what was it about Hawaii that inspired you to learn ukulele and to write music such as your ukulele song with Humpback Whale?
Hawaii is such an amazing place. It's hard to go there and without being moved or inspired. You're there, and the ukulele is such a part of the culture and the sound, and it breathes. There's just something about the music that it becomes so symbiotic with, their language and just the relationship with everything. And the basis of all is in nature. For sure. I've always loved the sound of humpback whales. And when I first heard this recording of the humpback whale, I was like, it needs to have ukulele accompaniment. So I don't know, it was just the songs of the humpback whale. I remember as a kid growing up, they used to have these, I'm going to really date myself, like the National Geographic episode, magazines, and they would have these little plastic insert, like 33s.
I had that.
You had that one?
I had that
and
one.
There was one as a kid, somewhere in the 70s that we would put it on, and, the guy, like, this is the sound of the humpback whale. And it was it's a whole other world. It was amazing. And so it was great to kind of put those two music together and try to feel the timing and the pace and the melody and the rhythm of what the whale was doing. It was very cool. It was very fun.
So you really wrote the piece to the whale?
Yes. The whale was a diva. I had to write everything to the whale, for sure. Yeah.
I love that. Let's listen to a little bit of that.
Hey, Greg, it's amazing to be in this space as someone from the Congo. It's very difficult to catch someone who has written music or songs, who is famous, and who is, singing about things that are very important for this generation and next generations. And I really wanted to emphasize the fact that you have also written music inspired by indigenous religions, such as Spirit of the Great Bear, and Eastern religions such as the Kyoto. So what is the wisdom from the first people's traditions of North America that you sought to capture in this music?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. There's just something so peaceful, so tranquil to me of the indigenous American peoples. It's a beautiful thing. That particular piece, what inspired me was if you remember 14 months ago, when the pandemic first hit, and everybody said we got to be in lockdown for 2 to 3 weeks, right? And we had no idea it was going to turn into this thing that it turned into, and everybody was like, wow, 2 or 3 weeks, that sounds terrible, undoable. And I kind of really wrote it to, as a musician, you're always, based in time and the construct of time, but there's just something so peaceful and calming of you mentioned Kyoto, of Eastern music, and I think indigenous music that is a little more free in time, and you can kind of pause and reflect. And I've had a native flute for years, and also gave me a chance to finally play and record something with that, and with acoustic guitar, and you kind of have like a nice synth loop in the back that was just really supposed to be calming, and hopefully bring a calmness to people that were having a very hard time at the beginning of the pandemic. It's almost like a meditation in some ways.
That was cool.
Wow.
Thanks. Yeah, that piece, the particular piece, the Spirit of the Great Bear, kind of came through. It was just a calming, it was really like mood. Like for me, I write a lot with like visions in my head, or pictures in my head. I wouldn't say visions, but let's say with pictures. And so there's usually like an image, be it if I'm writing a piece about the beach or the Alhambra or Kyoto, always thinking of the old capital with the pagoda and things like that. And same thing with the Spirit of the Great Bear, thinking of the plains and the Rockies, and I'm also amateur astronomer. And so, the Great Bear is for us, part of the Big Dipper. That's actually that's the tail of the Big Dipper. And so, which was a huge, which was the bear in many indigenous, cultures. So it was just, space for me, astronomy is very calming. It was a culmination of many things I just kind of tied together. And hopefully the music reflects that. I'm trying to look for a piece that would kind of speak to many people, on different levels.
Thank you. Yeah.
In addition to being a composer of many genres and a performer in many genres, you're also on the Mars Foundation, a team that is investigating how human beings might live someday on Mars. I know that you've thought a lot about humans living in extreme conditions underneath the ocean, on Mars, in lava tubes. And as BioEarth thinks about biovillages, and we project out into the future of decades and decades from now, we think very carefully about what parts of civilization need to be preserved, cultivated, and passed on. So I'm going to ask you to imagine and paint a picture for us about Mars someday, maybe by 2100. What kind of music do you think people will be making, if they're making music at all? And where does your mind take you when you think about that?
And this is where? Mars? Earth?
Mars.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I think as a whole, most music in every culture kind of reflects the society at large, and melody structures reflect the language of the people. If you look at Irish music, with have the inflections versus Scottish or German, French, African, rhythms, things like that. I was actually, the Mars Foundation started with alumni from MIT. I was privileged enough years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, that they were working on a project where we were working on 3D printing. So we have, with the Mars rovers that are there, we can kind of simulate the soil here on Earth, and it was basically 3D printing images of instruments. Like we get there, you would have certain, when you get there, you would have to have blueprints and schematics of all, screwdrivers and screws and bits. And so if anything breaks, you can actually 3D print and, make redundant supplies while you get there. And I was tagged in to go over schematics for 3D printing instruments and how that would work. Like how would guitar or anything in the string family that's wood-based, that has certain qualities and needs to reverberate and vibrate to cause sounds. It's in some ways easier to do a flute or a clarinet or things like that. So they're already thinking about what instruments are we going to play in Mars. There are a few simulation test places in the States, in Canada and Hawaii, now that are doing kind of simulation Mars things, and it's apparent that people need art and they need culture and they need at the end of the day they need to be able to process what you see, which is all the arts, be it poetry or music or writing, whatever. And so it's music will always be with us, for sure. It's an ancient art form. So it's awesome. It's very cool. I couldn't guess what it would sound like. I have no idea. I couldn't say. Excited. I hope to hear it one day.
Well, this is not a very smart question, but how would string instruments work in that atmosphere?
Well, I guess it depends. If you're living in like a dome city, like Elon Musk has proposed and many others, the air quality has to be very similar, just because of the humans and the plants, that would have to be there symbiotically. If you're looking at lava tubes, underneath, that would be another way. But they're also looking at different technologies that would be kind of self-containing within the tubes themselves. And so again, I think as long as there's people in the mix, you kind of have to have a very similar Earth-like air quality, because we're so fragile.
Is Mars Foundation looking at people living in lava tubes?
We've looked at a lot of different things. There's a lot of different speculations. We have a lot of different formats at different things. So we'll see. I think that's a little bit farther down the line. I think initially that people need to be on the surface, and that's kind of what most people are looking at now, kind of bringing what living off what you're bringing, and being able to live off the land as much as you can.
Well, let me ask you this. When you think about biovillages in that way, and you think about the kinds of moods that might result from living communally in a biovillage, do you think that heavy metal is going to make it? Because you're a big metalhead.
I am a big metalhead.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a tough question. I'd like to say yes, but I don't know. It's going to be, music always reflects the culture. So, metal, as we know it today, is always an offshoot of punk, which has a huge, very, against, religion and establishment and things like that. I think as long as you have an establishment, there's always going to be people wanting to go against it, no matter what the size of, the society that you're in. It just depends on what level. So I'd like to see, but it might be not as we know it today, which would be a great thing. It'll be evolved, so.
A new phase of metal.
A new phase of metal.
Well, let's listen to some of your metal tunes. This is Building 7. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Ooh, okay. Building 7 is inspired by the last building that fell on 9/11. It's the one that actually fell about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That most people kind of don't think about or forget about. That was not directly hit by either the airplanes.
Cool.
Yeah, not the spirit of the Great Bear.
No. Wow, you are so versatile. Okay.
Thank you.
Greg, one of the things I just love about you is that you're not a one-note guy. You're across all these different genres, which so deeply speaks to me as a consumer of music, as a very amateur musician. And one thing that really strikes me about using metal to express this moment at 9/11 is I think a lot of times we forget that music is medicine. And I think metal sometimes is really powerful for tackling things like grief and suffering and chaos and loss. And so I actually find myself craving the sounds of things like metal, often metal music, when I'm hurting or going through trauma.
Yeah.
I would love to know how music heals in your life. What are the ways in which you use music as medicine?
Oh, wow. It's like every day. I mean, it's and it's true. I mean, for me, metal's always been, if you're dealing with something of a rough nature, of something that's going on and in your life that might be harsh. It's you in some ways you don't feel alone, like other people are going through these, or pain or suffering, being it loss or grief, death, whatever it is, and sickness for sure, and you. I mean, personally, that was for me, that was a big one. I mean, for years I played, I kind of put the metal thing on the shelf for a while, and I was doing classical guitar, exclusively, and really studying, Western theory and harmony and things like that, orchestration. And then I got sick, and so I had cancer, stage 3B cancer, a little over 9 years ago, and so. And I picked up the electric guitar again. It was almost like out of a necessity. So, the way not to get too specific, but like the port that the chemo came in my chest, the guitar was against my chest, and it was actually painful to play. Where the body of an electric guitar was smaller and it wasn't as deep, and so it was more comfortable for me to play. And the chemo was like having the flu times 100. And so your bodies and muscles ache, and the tension of an electric guitar strings, it's just so much easier to push down the strings. So that was so therapeutic and healing for me, and the result of me having this kind of balance of electric and classical guitar going on in my life right now. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now.
I think that's one of your first albums that I heard was Chemo Brain.
Yeah, for sure. Which was all music that I wrote during the cancer process. Wow. And a lot of the original themes and things I didn't even remember doing, writing. I kind of came across these whatever riffs or songs and things, and they were like sketches, and I was like, I have no recollection of doing it, but it was clearly me, and so I just flushed them out the rest of the way and released it. And that was, and at least in my life and in other people's lives, I was lucky to touch a bunch of people that have went through chemo, because the chemo brain thing's not really discussed, because you get really foggy headed, forgetful. It's very difficult, for people that are usually, go-getters or intellectual and involved in things, and then you just find yourself standing in a room like, why am I here? What's going on? What was I doing? What was I thinking? And I mean, I would have a pen and paper with me that I would just write stuff down, with, and so that was a thing. So it was for me and for many people in my community, it became a conversational piece that was like, oh yeah, chemo brain, that's a thing. And so yeah.
My own family's going through a cancer journey with my father, and has for the last number of years, and I find that I really reach for music to cope with that journey. And also I find that he explores and connects with me through music when I'm visiting. And so I think it's both a language and a medicine, and it's something that, when we're in the midst of suffering, is transcendent. It helps us to reach for those places of safety, or even of reckoning. It's not always safe.
Sure.
That's one of the things I like about music, is that you're not always safe in the music, but you are exploring, you are creating, even as the listener, you're having that kind of creative experience.
Yeah. It's interesting. A few weeks ago, I went to see my mom. Now, my mom is in a home, and she's been dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia. And if you've dealt with somebody in this condition, it's always hard to try to communicate with and connect with and have them respond. And we went off on this wing. It might have been for Mother's Day. And I was like, I had whatever half-hour visit or whatever with her, and I was like, yeah, I'm just going to play some music. And I just took out my phone and trying to talk about growing up. And she was a huge classical head, and I was listening to Aaron Copland's Appalachian Spring, and she just sat there, and you could see her eyes, and she was listening, as the woodwinds would come in and the strings would take over. I mean, it's such a gorgeous, beautiful piece of music, and you could tell she would smile and she would light up, and she was wiggling her foot and moving her fingers, and I mean, it was it reached her, and that was in that way was in some way the deepest I've been able to really communicate with her in a very long time. And it was all through music, and not through words, but just sitting there and sharing that piece of music with her was a beautiful thing.
And I know you recently wrote a song for your mother.
Yes, I did. It's true. Yeah. That will premiere in Vermont in August. So it's a piece for guitar and violin. So it's kind of a play on words. My mom's first name is Alice. So there's the Baroque dance, the Allemande. So I changed it to Alismond. So kind of named after her. So yeah, I'm excited to get that. So it's for guitar and violin. So excited to get that finally, performed in the post-pandemic world. Yeah, so it's cool. So she's digitally heard it.
I actually picked up the djembe, which is an instrument that Rodrigue and I share in common.
Yeah.
And so I'm really interested in the way that rhythm communicates across cultures. And I'd love to know more of your thinking around that.
Sure. I spent a lot of time studying music from Spain, like flamenco music and things like that. And there's certain techniques that, obviously the griots that came up from Africa, during the Moorish occupation, that wound up really bringing into the culture of Spain. And it's still there and became kind of this huge melting pot, especially Andalusia, the southern part of Spain, and which is all the flamenco. And there's so many African rhythms, and essentially flamenco is just dance music. There are always 12-bar phrases, and just where the accents fit. Rhythm, and that's just kind of the cool thing. I lived outside of Miami for 13 years too, so I had the whole Afro-Cuban thing, and just the rhythms, and it's just but it's so awesome. I remember first time I heard like Tito Puente or something doing like Afro-Cuban stuff, and it just blew my mind, because as a musician I want to count it out, and there's so many things, this polyphonic thing going on, and it's mind-blowing. It's so amazing. It's great.
You really are a sponge that just soaks up influences from everywhere.
I love it. Yeah. It's true. It's there's always something good to hear that you can learn from, different cultures or different, people, and over the centuries that we have access to. It's amazing. Yeah. Earlier today, I was watching a video, it was like Danny Kaye and Bob Hope were like tap dancing on a table. It was like from an old movie that got colorized, and it was amazing.
I know that.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
I didn't even know Bob Hope could tap dance, and I was like,
incredible.
This is great. And that was the thing too. I'm like, how did tap dancing fall out of like society? Because it's really awesome.
Hey, Greg, it's actually amazing to hear from your perspective, and as a Congolese man. So Congo has been built in that legacy of music in Africa, with the rumba style, which is basically connected to the salsa. Mm-hmm. And it's been renowned in the whole Africa. And then now many people are playing music, but Congo is one of the top countries to play music in Africa. So recently, about a week ago or so, we had a volcanic eruption in the city of Goma. And many people were displaced. They left the city to neighboring villages to flee for their lives. But I've seen many musicians talking about this, singing about the volcano. Some of them are also raising some money to support people. And I could see how the music part can play a big role, even in telling people to evacuate at a certain point. Because if people, the governor or whoever the authority is goes on the radio, some people won't hear because there's no electricity sometimes or no way to hear that. But by music, because people like the music, they would hear the message. So how do you think, how powerful is the music when it comes to communicating with people, a lot of people, mass of people, or the community?
Yeah, I'm biased, obviously. I think it's hugely important. Even personally, music is, you look around and in a lot of traumatic situations, there's always been music. Of course, I always think of the quartet on the Titanic. I mean, they played, and they knew they were going down, and they still played to try to keep people calm. I was doing a classical concert years ago in this place. It was kind of like a cafe / bookstore, and people were browsing and whatever, and a big storm came through, and the power blew out, and I just kept playing, and then eventually, sometime later, the power came back on, and I remember afterwards people were like, wow, that was great, because when the power went out, people kind of naturally go, oh, they panic, and it was like, but they're like, oh, but the guitar was still going on, it was so soothing, and that it kind of brought calmness and to a peace to do it. As a musician, I didn't know what else to do, so I just kept playing. but it helped the people. But so I could see, and I've seen on the news, what's going on in Congo, and my heart. I mean, that's very sad. So I hope everything works out for all those people, that they wind up, getting to safety. But at the end of the day, I think when people go through traumatic events, they hold hands and keep their loved ones close, and usually will sing song or sing a prayer or something to kind of just to bring them together. And when you're facing that kind of traumatic experience, so many things that might normally divide us throughout the day kind of goes away. You come down to your very basic instincts, and music is always there. I mean, if I was to do like a Maslow's thing, I would definitely put music in that hierarchy of needs. I mean, music is just essential, and it's been evident for millennia. No matter what part of the world people come from, it's just it's there.
Well, I would like to add one more descriptor to your list, which is musical ambassador of so many cultures, so many influences. I think that you just soak it all up, and you share it, and your passion and your enthusiasm comes through, and you just transmit that to everybody who listens to your music. So thank you so much.
No, thank you.
I thought it'd be great if instead of playing Greg's song at the end of Rooted Conversations, we let Greg play us out.
Sure.
Would you like to grab your guitar?
You want me to grab my guitar? Okay. Sure.
Are you ready?
Yeah. You want me to start playing?
Well, here's Greg C. Brown live with all of 30 seconds notice.